Hello, everybody, and welcome to our third discussion for Doctor Who Season 2, all about The Well, which was a fantastic episode. And you might have noticed that this week I have more than one person to talk to. So, as well as Sean joining me, as per usual, we also have Mick Joest from Cinema Blend, our lovely friend and colleague, joining us as well. So, thank you, Mick, for joining us this week.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about it, kind of.
Hmm. We'll dig into that kind of in a second. So obviously, as I say, I really enjoyed this episode. And if you haven't already, you can go and check my full review, the ups and downs for this episode. So I'm not going to talk too much about my in-depth thoughts right here. So I'm going to throw it straight to Mick and Sean just to hear your overall thoughts on the episode. So seeing as you've given us that bombshell there, Mick, we'll start with you.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I feel like I I don't want to say I disliked The Well, but I will say that I felt let down by it. And I think it's more, I don't know if it's so much the episode itself as that how the previous episode ended because you have Lux, you have Mrs. Flood come up and she gives that very big tease of like, oh, the show's ending on May, and it's a very meta reveal. And the episode itself is very animation, very meta and everything. And then you have this complete tonal shift, which isn't necessarily weird for Doctor Who to do. You know, they switch between genres and stuff. But the preview for next week kind of gave more of a scary tone, kind of like a horror vibe than what I got when I watched the actual episode. I also think that it kind of, I don't know, I felt myself just like thinking a lot more in the episode than I was like immersed in it. Like once it was became clear it was like a sequel episode from the Tenet era, then I was like sitting there trying to remember the original episode and like everything that happened there. And then as Ellie might hilariously recall, I got like mixed up at the end because as the TARDIS disappeared, I was like, wait a second, is this like a time loop? Like, why is the monster still alive? I thought we had that. And she basically told me that I wasn't paying attention well enough, but it's fine. It was just, I don't know that. I mean, I think that's just kind of indicative of how I felt about the episode. I kind of felt a little let down by, I went in with high expectations, like, oh, Mrs. Flood dropped this huge reveal. We're going to learn a lot more about it. And it was just a completely separate episode that I felt like didn't tie in too much. And I came in with expectations for something else. And I think that plays into my disappointment.
Very interesting. I think you're the first person I've heard that's had a more kind of negative response to the episode. I think the majority of things I've seen have been relatively positive about this episode, including my own reaction to it. So I'd be interested to hear what Sean thought of the episode.
The greatest load of crap I've ever watched. No. I just had to outdo Mick there. That's really interesting. Do you know what? I really quickly, I think that's a really interesting point about how Lux ended and where this episode then came in. Because you're absolutely right. As the next episode along, it's weird in terms of the pacing, and I think when we see the bird's eye of the overall season, we might go like, all right, Lux ties in with that one, or that ties in
Mhm.
with that one a bit better, and it's funny. It's kind of like we obviously we've talked about Strange New Worlds an awful lot, and how much we enjoy the
Right.
episodic nature of it. And sometimes, where I struggle a little bit maybe with some of Discovery from Picard's serialization, and sometimes there's a happy medium. And I think the ending of Lux go because Mrs. Flood appears in this episode again. Sorry, I should have opened with that. Because she appears in this episode again, it does feel like it's the next stage in the story, but it doesn't feel like it's the next stage in the story. Maybe last week's reveal might have come a little bit later on. Having said all of that, I did really enjoy this episode. I thought the tension was very well done. I thought there was a tiny little misdirect in the look of the well itself. I was thinking a bit more Satan Pit, Impossible Planet.
Hmm.
But I did think early on. Full disclosure, I feel like I absorbed that this was going to be a sequel to something before I saw it. I feel like I went in knowing that, but for the life of me, I cannot say where I heard that. Um,
Might have been the theory video we put out about that exact theory we had about this episode, Sean.
You don't expect me to watch the videos we put out on the channels, yeah? Like, God's sake. But it is, and but going in didn't ruin it, didn't spoil it or anything for me. So I went, but I did go in thinking Satan Pit. That's what I had in my head going in. Plus, I feel like the design of the base was closer in design to what we saw in Satan Pit, Impossible Planet. I liked the change up with how the monster was used. I quite enjoy that. I've seen people kind of go and I don't know about like that because I like that we didn't see it. We just got a little hint here and there.
Hmm.
And I think yeah, I'm glad they didn't reveal anything more than they did. Um, and that's my overall thoughts. We can get into the more specific now.
I mean, so you kind of touched on that there, but I think the biggest kind of debate that we've seen following the episode is about it being a sequel to Midnight and whether it necessarily needed to be a sequel to Midnight, whether it didn't. If you've seen the behind the scenes conversations, Russell T Davies does make it quite clear that this wasn't always intended to be a sequel to Midnight, but in the process of writing it, kind of saw some similarities, and that's then the direction they decided to go with the episode. So what I kind of mentioned in the ups and downs, and it wasn't an up or a down, because I was kind of in the middle with it, kind of feeling like I don't think having it as a sequel to Midnight hindered this episode or retroactively ruined Midnight, which I think was a big concern for a lot of people, that it was going to somehow ruin Midnight. But I also feel like this could have been a standalone episode with no connection to a previous one, with the exact same concept, creature, and would have worked just as well. And I kind of felt like it wasn't necessary to be a sequel to Midnight. Like for the nostalgia elements, I was like, yeah, this is great. But in my mind, I feel like it was maybe just I can't quite grasp why they decided to go down that route because it would have worked just as well without that connection.
I mean, I don't. I see just as someone who works on the internet, I'm sure Russell T Davies, when he was like writing this, he saw the connection to Midnight, and then that like thought bubble popped in his head is like, if I don't make this a sequel to Midnight, people are gonna think I'm just recycling old stories and being derivative and stuff like that. So I could see maybe being wanting to do that because I'm sure, I mean, I'm sure you guys would see, they would be comments all over the video, the ups and downs. They're like, oh, this was just a Midnight ripoff. He was just doing what he did years ago. So I think I can see the logic in wanting to do that. And I think honestly, I would probably move the episode up knowing he went in not expecting it to be a sequel episode. I think that actually does strengthen the overall quality of the episode for me. Like I said, my opinion's so skewed by like I went in with higher expectations and it wasn't that I was, I was just let down, but that isn't to say I don't think the episode was good. I think it was a solid episode. Um, but yeah, I don't know, Sean, what do you think?
Uh, I I I'm aware. There's one thing now. This is not specific to this episode. This is every time this happens. There's one thing that really bugs me. It's when there's a reveal that something's a sequel. So wait, let me play footage from that
Mm.
first episode because remember, you don't need it.
Hmm.
You don't
I
need it.
kind of
You either
agreed with
remember
you.
it or you don't.
Thinking, I had this thought process thinking if you are trying to remind viewers who already know the episode, then we already know. But
Hmm.
if you're trying to put this in there for the new viewers, then putting two random clips from that previous episode is still not going to really help.
That would be my opinion. Unless there is a contractual obligation that David Tennant must appear X amount of times per season.
I'll confess that it did help me, but I will agree that the general like flashback thing, because the camera is so just like different, they have like the weird fog going on. It doesn't look pretty. It's like you see it and you're like, oh wow, I'm clearly looking at footage right now, and that kind of sucked me out of things a bit.
It's
Mm.
funny as well because they did it back in is it The Girl Who Died? And they have the footage, of course, of from Fires of Pompeii. It's the exact same idea. And it's the same thing again. It's very distorted footage and also it was different cameras. I mean it was filmed a different way. So anyway, it's a pet peeve overall. Um and so that is like, and I loved the music. I loved the return of because even I was there, I was texting with Ellie and Danny as we were watching it, And I was like, I know yous have, but I'll kill myself if I don't say this. Did yous all catch the ninth and 10th Doctor's theme there as they landed? And they're like, Sean, are you serious? I'm like, I'm sorry. Um, and then, of course, the theme from Midnight as well. Now, I'm a hoe for musical callbacks. Gimme, gimme, gimme. So I loved that little bit of it. So I love that the story that didn't originate as a Midnight sequel evolved to such a place that we were able to get that music back again.
I mean, fair enough. If we get callbacks just for the music, that's fine. In terms of the midnight entity, the creature itself, I think part of why I didn't necessarily feel that it needed to be a sequel was because obviously they had changed how the creature affected people, toyed with people. So I kind of in my mind was like the thing that made Midnight so gripping was the what it did to the people in that little cabin, the way it played with their minds, the making them repeat each other. But by changing that element of the creature in this episode, you kind of removed the part of it that made it so gripping in Midnight. And so you'd kind of, I don't know, it just was a different creature. It did something different. But I do want to point out because in the comments of our ups and downs, I had two downs for this episode, and boy, people had opinions about those downs. So I do want to point out first for the first down because I spoke about the inconsistency with the rules as to when it killed people because there were instances where I was like, hang on a minute, shouldn't I have just killed someone? And I do want to actually put my hands up and say that maybe I didn't quite grasp the entire concept of this creature. Not because I watched it once and just made my mind up, because the ups and downs were based on about 4 viewings of the episode. So it's maybe a criticism for how it was explained in the episode. But I will put my hands up and say I maybe didn't quite grasp the full the context of how it worked. Because I thought if she turned her back on you, you die. But there were instances where she turned 360 and nobody died, or people were running away and they had their backs to people and nobody died. And I was like, hang on a second. Since then, people have maybe explained that it's more a case of it's not about her turning her back on you, but you going behind her, which apparently is a different thing. It's maybe just a little bit confusing. But in terms of the changes to the creature, were you guys on board with that, or did it kind of feel like this is a different creature?
It didn't bother me. I will say that, but I would say the creature from Midnight was scarier. In how it, I think both because it could either be the same monster 400,000 years apart, which I think Russell alluded to, or it could be we live on a planet that I don't want to live on, because there's some seriously horrible monsters living here. So I think certainly by the end, I interpreted that there was more than one. And that it could do different things. I did see the critiques of, like, people walking behind her and they were fine, or she would turn people. I took that it's the monster screwing with people, that it wanted you to be afraid of being behind her, as opposed to a hard and fast rule of you are behind her, ergo you die. I think it's no, the monster's fixating on you now. And I thought that's what I took from that.
Yeah, I think the Midnight one's scarier. I agree with Sean's analysis that I think it was more like this is like a species or like type of monster. This isn't the exact same one from Midnight, and they could have different tendencies and stuff like that. Ellie, what you said, I feel like is interesting because one of the things I did get hung up on, because I also question the rules of like, wait a second, how does this and like, of course it's invisible, we can't see it. But I was like, so how is this thing like moving? Like, if we could see it, is like when she's sprinting, is this thing to ensure it kills everything that goes behind her? Is it like running, backpedaling like behind her, like trying to keep up? Or is it like latched to her back or something? Like I was trying to figure out the logistics. And then there was that whole sequence where they shoot the water and then it attacks itself. So, I mean, not to poke holes in your theory, Sean, but like this thing's smart enough to screw with people, but it also cannot. It sees its own reflection. It's like, I gotta hit myself.
I'm glad it's not just me that picks out the inconsistencies. Like this is why it's great to have people give their feedback after the ups and downs, because I didn't look at it like that. And now that I've heard other people's thoughts on it and how they interpreted it. And maybe I'm willing to kind of go, oh, okay, and maybe change my mind on that. So it is very interesting, but I think overall maybe there was just a lack of clarity in terms of what it is. And I guess, as you say, that is one of the dangers of having a creature that you can't see. It's hard in your mind to place exactly where it is or what it's doing or how it's going to get you, which I guess plays into the whole paranoia of the episode. But as someone who's picking the episode apart, it's hard to get your brain around.
What do you guys think it looked like? I want to know in your head, like, did you have like a visual of like what you thought it looked like? In mine, it was kind of like the same height as the woman, but like kind of like a golem kind of like looking Lord of the Rings kind of thing, like
Bogey
crazy
monster from
eyes.
Space Babies.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I actually don't. And I'm really glad that the episode didn't really give us much of a glimpse of what it looked like, because that was one of the worries I had, especially when you saw in the behind the scenes content that they obviously did have something in mind to have for filming purposes. But I like to think that that's not like canonically what it looks like, but just kind of a point of reference for filming.
Mhm.
But I like that it's this kind of unknown. And I've tried in my mind not to kind of give it any look, because I think if I start drawing comparisons to other creatures, I'm going to start comparing it to that rather than just having it as this scary being that you have no concept of whatsoever. So I'm glad they didn't ruin it. And this is what I mean when I say they could have ruined Midnight. So I'm glad that they didn't by doing things like that.
Yeah, I don't really. Okay, bogey monster aside, I don't really have an image in my head. We saw something that could have been a tentacle or a tongue in
Mhm.
silhouette. But I mean that's just classic monsters, isn't it?
Mm.
You know, they're kind of walking.
I tell you what, I struggled with that because Danny sent me a photo. He'd like zoomed right in to try and show me that one freeze frame of it. And I genuinely couldn't figure out what it was that he was trying to show me. I was like, I can't work this out. And he's like, the teeth. And I'm like, I can't see what you're trying to show me here. So well done, Doctor Who, for not ruining what the monster looks like. Even when people are trying to point it out to me, I was still like, I can't see it.
Someone showed me a picture. I was like, nah, I'm not seeing it. Not seeing it.
I was really trying.
There was a tiny moment, like a fleeting second, when I thought the way it moved, like, are we getting like a weeping angel? It can move so fast or something like that.
Mm.
Mhm.
I also got that with the mirrors for a while. Why would they smash the mirrors? Um,
It was funny because I did see a couple of comments on the video, and I want to say yes, I sent a text and I stand by it. The whole thing was aliens. Nuked the site from orbit. I mean, it was all walking through LB-426. I loved it. Because of course, what was Saturday, 426? It was Alien Day. Was that an accident? Absolutely not. Uh, this is perhaps why I'm not doing the ups and downs for this series because to just be Sean spends 40 minutes talking about something else. So, but yeah, I did love that. Like, nuke the site from orbit. Yeah, you do. Get up and nuke that site from orbit. The only way to be sure.
so I want to move on. We could talk about aliens if you want, but that's not what we're here for.
Have a good day. I'm good.
Um, the for me, and I think for the majority of people from what I've seen, the standout element of this episode was Rose Ayling-Ellis's performance as Alice. I think she was superb. She carried the episode, I think, and I think her whole storyline and the way they incorporated her being deaf into the storyline worked really, really well as well. So I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on Alice and Rose's performance there.
Yeah, I think it's phenomenal. I want to applaud her performance. I want to applaud Russell T Davies for continuing to cast these types of roles and being very deliberate and intentional and giving these characters like meaningful storylines. It's not just like fodder. It's not just like, oh, we've done it. Especially in a time where I think a lot of Hollywood shows are kind of backing off that in America. Because of, we don't have to get into politics here, but we know why. It's just so to show that bravery and continue to stay the course as Doctor Who has done in the reboot era for sure. But just it's just so meaningful to continue to give voices to marginalized communities and making them relevant in the story and telling those stories because that means a lot to the people And I mean, it means a lot to me to see that represented.
Hmm. Before you give your opinion there, Sean, I just wanted to jump in because what's very interesting about this character is she wasn't originally written as a deaf character, but once Rose was cast, they then reworked the character and changed the storyline to kind of fit around her. And I think that that whole element of the storyline and of her character elevates the story. So I think it's a really good example of kind of casting the best person for the job and then readjusting and making the story work. And I think it was a really good, I think it was handled really well. I loved their little, I don't know, I'm going to call it their universal translator because in my mind, that's what those devices are for. It just goes beyond vocal language translation. Because otherwise, why do they have them?
Oh, the floating closed captions.
Yeah,
That's what
I
I was
kind of, in
calling
my
them.
mind, I was like, I feel like these are Doctor Who's version of a universal translator. But it goes beyond just kind of different languages, spoken languages, but can also help in interpreting other languages as well. That's my headcanon anyway.
100%. No, and I was watching Unleashed over the weekend, and I love Rose's point that the fact that the character was deaf was not the point of the character, but that she was deaf really played into the plot, which
Yeah.
I really like that. Because there was nothing it wasn't a case of yeah, the deaf episode. Do you know what I mean?
Mm,
Um and just her, and then there's things that, because she is deaf, they could do with the story that, kind of basically hit the heartstrings a little bit more. Particularly, don't turn your back on me.
hmm
Like, oh God, I mean, she just played that so well. I really felt that.
hmm
Um, and just that fear. Even if halfway through the episode, I was like, oh yeah, yeah. She is, by the way, the monster who's going to kill them all. That's where I was about halfway through the episode, and then I was like, oh no, I'm kind of glad they didn't go that way. And then we got the ending, and now I'm kind of like, I don't know if I kind of wish they went that way because now I feel worried. Um, and yeah, but regardless of how it ended, I thought she played an absolute blinder. Um,
hmm
and yeah, I liked her a lot more than I liked the hot guard who was an idiot.
One of the things that some people did point out in the comments for the ups and downs that we didn't really cover much in those videos or in that video is something that I definitely want to cover here. What's going on with Earth? Why does nobody seem to know what Earth is? No one's heard of Earth. Um, Obviously, this is playing into the bigger arc of the series. It was interesting that this is the episode there where we started to kind of realize that this was bigger than just the Doctor and Belinda knowing there was something wrong, but for 500,000 years in the future, for no one to have heard of it, something's clearly happened there. So, I mean, what's going on?
Well, I mean, obviously, what's happening is that this entire series is set in that time when Davros pulled all those planets out of time,
Mm,
and is using it to power the reality bomb, because you can do whatever you want with that because it was pulled out of time. Everything is timey-wimey, non-linear. There you go. I've solved it. Imagine it was that.
write that down. Write
Yeah,
that down so we
Right,
can
right that
claim
down.
it.
create a video. Like kind of like.
So, I mean, here's the thing, and I'm gonna be a downer right now, but I feel as though, oh man, I don't even know if I should put myself out here and saying this. I feel as though Earth, since like Flux, has become the new Gallifrey, where it's in a constant state of either being on the verge of destruction or it's fine. And I was like, I feel like now that we've gone to the well so many times with Gallifrey, it's like let's make Earth the new Gallifrey. And so when they were like, "What do you mean you haven't heard of Earth?" I'm like, "What? It'll be back." Like it was just, I kind of like rolled my eyes at it to where it was like I'm interested in what's happening, but like I said, it's like the Gallifrey thing of being in a constant state of just back and forth and back and forth. I just want to know. I just want to know.
Mm.
Just tell me what's
And
happening.
as the queen of picking out the inconsistencies for this episode, apparently, how can they have never heard of Earth? They don't know what humanity is, but they do know British Sign Language from Earth.
I didn't even know it was British Sign Language. I assumed it was American Sign Language,
And
me
then they were
being
using
a pompous
BSL
American. Yep.
because there are a lot of people in the comments that were like, I didn't understand that until I realized that BSL and ASL are very different.
Mhm.
This was BSL. Um, it absolutely was. And also to the few people who assumed that I just made up sign language, my own sign language for the opening of the ups and downs, I can assure you that was 100% real BSL, and I did my research before doing it.
It's just because of all of the other times that you've made up sign language and just
I would
the
absolutely never
slurs
just
that you put out there as well.
make up sign language and put it on the internet for everybody to see. Could you imagine?
It's a very Ellie
Happens.
thing to do, to be fair.
Oh, goodness me. But yeah, there's a little Earth doesn't exist. You've never heard of it, but you do know sign language from Earth.
That's
Okay.
because at least with the spoken language, TARDIS, all covered. So is the TARDIS translating hand movements?
I
Which,
don't know. I think
fairness,
if we
in
dig into these
1963, you know that they would be like, yes.
yeah.
Okay, I feel like this feels as good as a time to bring it up without derailing Ellie's plans so much. But since they don't remember Earth and they don't remember that, they don't remember Britney Spears or Toxic, which I thought was such a great needle drop. And also, like, like, how only Russell T Davies could get away with using Britney Spears as Toxic twice in a series and me not care either time. Like, as soon as he hit it, it pulled me into, like, oh, yeah, that's what we're going to. Which, by the way, is a callback to the Earth's destruction, another Earth's destruction episode. So that had to be like an Easter egg to like what was coming.
I love,
hmm
oh, we getting Cassandra back. That'd be awesome.
That's what I
Honestly,
was hoping. I was like, Cassandra.
someone said to me a little while ago, what monster would you bring back? And I was like, oh, I want to see Cassandra again. I want to see Cassandra made in 2025. But I kind of hope that they just make her exactly how they made her before. Don't try making it all like glamorous and CGI heavy for 2025. If it doesn't look like it did in 2005, no.
I agree. Let's
Here's
go
where
with the
I'd push
practical
back.
Cassandra that they did in the end of time or in the end of the world.
Have Cassandra look like a Kardashian. I think that would be like the winning thing in 2025.
Oh my God. That's the plot for season 3.
Yes.
And that's it. The entire plot, the whole season, it's just the doctor sitting with a cup of
Kim
tea, just being just like,
Kardashian.
I'm sitting this one out. This I just can't, you know. And then someone going like, the doctor, you're one to talk about having some work done.
Make her Cassandra with a K. Just change it to the K. She has her own reality series.
Oh my God.
Absolutely would as well, wouldn't she?
hmm
Keeping up with Cassandra. Oh, it'd be amazing.
That's the next spin-off.
Careful, Russell's listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, damn it, they've found my plan. Now I've got to think of something else. Um, Going back onto the more serious notes, although I will talk about
You
keeping
say
up
the
with
more serious.
Cassandra.
What if it turns out she's Mrs. Flood?
Well, that would be something. Could you imagine?
They called me the face of Bo.
Um, Another thing that I downed in this episode, and I feel I want to stand by my down, but I will give some further explanation, a little bit more defense to why I've given it this, because I think a lot of people in the comments were attacking the down. Was the Doctor's reaction to coming face to face with the creature in this episode? Because, and here's where I want to say, right, because I think a lot of people have said to me, this episode, the crying felt warranted. And I can agree to a degree. But what's happened is exactly what I've said was going to happen in every single other time we've spoken about him crying, is that he has done it in every single episode, that now that we've got to a point where it should feel warranted, I don't care anymore. It hasn't impacted me, because you've done it in every episode in instances where it doesn't feel warranted, that it's like the boy who cried wolf. And now we've got to a moment where I should have really gone, wow, he's so scared, look at his reaction. I felt nothing other than rolling my eyes and going, there we go. That was the predictable response I was waiting for. And I want to hear your guys' opinions on this, because obviously a lot of people had some very strong opinions against my down. And while I do agree that it was maybe a warranted instance for it, it doesn't have the impact anymore. Too little, too late at this point because you've done it too much beforehand.
I'll just jump in really quickly and just say I agree. I think it probably was a situation where if we hadn't seen this in every single episode since Shooty arrived, with I think the exception of the giggle, um, this would have really hit home. Like, oh my God, he is scared. This is really got. But it's on. They must have decided day one this will be his. This is his Alonzi. This is his Alonzi, his Geronimo, his Clara, and it just doesn't do anything. There's no impact there anymore. And what bugs me is Shooty is a great actor. And I think because now crying is in every single episode, they should have flipped the script. Have him stoic.
That's
Like
what I said. Give us a burst of anger. Show us something from him we haven't seen before.
the one thing that I will concede, because I was looking at some of the comments. I will concede maybe not the time for a big doctor speech. I do want one. I do want a big doctor speech from Shooty. Absolutely. Everyone's got one, and I don't think we've had one yet from Shooty. But playing with the tension in this episode, I think no tears, and keep it stoic, keep him scared. Even if that scared turns to anger, fine with that. Like, I mean, more than fine with that. I think that run really works. And I understand we also get to talk in hindsight. We've seen the episode. We saw how it didn't work in that respect. But I think, yeah, the cumulative tears of the Doctor hurt what could have been a really powerful scene in this episode.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to say, but everyone just came at me saying, oh, you just don't want him to cry. He should have cried this time. And that was the point I was trying to make. So thank you, Sean, for backing me up there.
Mick, cut the legs out from under us. All right. Why?
So this is where I pull from my Cinema Blend article covering knowledge, and I will say, so it depends on how much you believe Russell T Davies at his word and giving the interviews, but he did tell Radio Times a while ago that he does not ever script in when the Doctor cries in his scripts. He leaves that entirely up to Shooty to decide when he cries. So, if, once again, if he's telling the truth, then it is completely Shooty Gatwa, completely random and just feeling in the moment and feeling that's the moment he should cry. Now, what I will say is that I feel like that's a problematic thing to do because, as we know, the Doctor Who actors are not shooting everything in sequence. They are filming the series finale on day one, and they're filming another scene completely different at another time. And as Shooty told me when they were writing it, sometimes Russell doesn't even know where the script is going when they're filming scenes. He's still in the process of like tweaking things and stuff. So I think in some ways it's kind of dangerous to have Shooty just cry whenever he feels like he needs to because you run the risk of a fandom gravitating to it and being like, there's meaning to this, there's meaning to this. Well, actually, it turns out there's no meaning to it. He's just crying when he feels it's appropriate for the Doctor to do so, which is where it creates a moment like in this episode where it's like, oh, he should be crying. But apparently, Shooty wasn't feeling it that day for the Doctor's scene, so he's not going to cry. And then we all wonder why. And I think that's the risk that you run into when you give an actor that much freedom. Not to say he doesn't have that runway because I've maintained he is probably the most talented actor the series has had in the modern run. He has, dude's electric. Every scene he has is awesome. So I trust his instincts more often than not. But you are going to run into some hiccups when you give him that much runway.
I agree on that. Like, because we are fortunate enough that we get to interview some really cool people out there, and you hear time and time again of how little freedom some actors have, and how it's very much it's got to be word perfect. Which, look, as a writer, my ego's like, well, yeah, of course it needs to be word perfect. And then that sometimes there's a bit of leeway with performance and people work together. Absolutely, everyone has different schools of thought. I feel like an overt showing of emotion, the way that letting tears run as freely as they have, I've kind of said it already, kind of can gut the power of them. I remember very early days when I was doing my master's in writing. Little plug there, Sean. Um, but one of the first things we get is like, now you remember the challenge of tears is that tears in your eyes is powerful. A tear running down your cheek, that's your climax.
Hmm.
Once you've done that, you're kind of like, right, we've got the emotional build, so we've got to that point. So what comes next? And obviously, there's many times when things come to, but that is a massive moment and should be treated as such. Whereas I'm being maybe a bit glib here, but in Doctor Who, that means it's lunchtime.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I think it's just kind of got to the point where as I say, it's become a bit predictable, which I guess if you're filming a film or something where, you've got one story that expands for 2 hours, there may be moments where that works. But when you've got kind of different stories, it kind of then gives this idea that it's every day. And like I say, it kind of loses that power, it loses the impact. Um, Also, I think for the most part, and again, please don't take my words and twist them to suggest that I don't think men should cry or all these things. But most of the
Oh, here
time,
we
you're
go.
trying.
She's really anti-men.
It's the Janeway part of her coming out.
Yeah,
That's
She's
what it
like,
is.
a weak man. I can't stand it.
yeah. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the majority of the time, if you're going to cry, you're trying not to. The thing about crying is when you're doing it, most of the time you're trying to hold that back as opposed to just, and I mean there are instances where it can be a relief to just let it all out, but for the majority of the time holding tears back is the kind of the thing you're trying to do. So I think when they're just falling so freely, like you said, Sean, it's kind of tears in your eyes as opposed to tears down your face. There's a difference, and I think when it's just, I don't know, maybe I'm digging myself into a hole here, but hey ho, I stand by my down for it in this episode. I feel like this was a really good opportunity for a different reaction, a different response from 15. Particularly because this was a creature he'd faced before. So I kind of, in my mind, felt like you faced this creature before and it absolutely terrified you. And in my mind, now that you're facing it for a second time, you should kind of approach it with a bit more confidence. Like, you beat me once, but I'm not going to let you get me again. As opposed to being almost just as scared as the first time. So then the other thing that we have had lots of lots of discussions about following this episode was the ending of this episode, which Mick clearly had a completely different reading of.
I was lost, man. I was like, what?
Died. How's she alive again? I was like, she never went on the planet.
I wish we could share our conversation in the WhatsApp because you were like, what? Like,
I
what are
was
you
so
talking about?
confused. You were like, I didn't really get this whole time travel, time loop thing. I'm like, what episode did you watch?
Yeah, I thought so. In my mind, what I thought happened, because they were like, "Oh, I'm having trouble remembering it. I don't know how I'm going to write this up." I was like, "What is going on? Like, what is she talking about?" And then like they're discussing the TARS, and I was like, "Is it a time loop? The monster's still alive? Did none of this happen? Does nothing matter?" And then like Ellie's like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "Oh."
You even
You're
watched the
like,
episode? No.
yeah, you're like, I thought she died, and now how is she alive again? I was like, who? She was asking how it went on the mission because she didn't go on the mission. I'm so confused. So, apart from Mick, who just read it in a completely different way, most people got the whole cliffhanger thing, the creature's alive. Was it ever on Belinda? Did it, if it was on Belinda, did it jump to Mo rather than Shia? Did Shia sacrifice herself for absolutely no reason whatsoever? We've also got the airlock showing us 4 life signs when there are actually only 3 people inside it. So was it on Alice the entire time? Was there more than one? There's so many questions because we got this really great ambiguous ending, which is something that Doctor Who doesn't often do, but when it does do it, we love it because it means conversations like this.
Um, I think poor Shia died for nothing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, whether or not there was a monster on her, and whether or not jumping from the well would do anything to the monster. That's the other thing as well. But yeah, so I hadn't thought whether it was on Belinda or not. It's a bit like the Vashta Nerada in that way, two shadows. At least then you can physically see you've got two shadows. Um, but yeah, definitely, I presume there was one still on Alice, or it could have been on one of the spares.
Mm.
Um,
Well,
Yeah.
this was the other thing. You know how I was talking about the inconsistencies before I maybe understood the rules of the creature? Um, because I was talking to my mum about this and I was like, I just don't understand. And then we were talking about the ambiguous ending. And she said, well, what if it was on Mo the whole time? And we tried to go back and look at the scene to see if Mo ever had her back to people, if anyone ever went behind her. And I don't know that anyone did. Now, if it was never on Shire, then that whole inconsistency thing still stands. But if Shire never had it on her back, when she turned her back and ran away from them and no one died, that's because it wasn't on her. It was never with her in the first place. So maybe, yeah, maybe my inconsistencies were right, but the fact is it was never on her.
So, in like movies when kids try to sneak into a movie theater and it's like they're stacked into a trench coat? What if the monsters were sitting on each other's shoulders behind her
the monster is
and
actually just three
then
kids
they
in a trench coat. That's amazing.
separated?
Oh my goodness. Because I mean, I was just thinking as well earlier on, Sean, you said, oh, maybe it's not the same creature. But where I've just kind of thought, actually, it is the same creature because it knew the doctor's name because it had encountered the doctor before.
Yes.
It knew the doctor. So it was definitely, at least if there was more than one, then maybe there was a different one that didn't. But the one that was on Alice, for sure, was the same creature that the doctor had encountered before.
It knew his name was Basil.
Hmm. People are being like, oh, the creature's River Song. I'm like, don't go there. Just because it knows his name, I don't think that means it's River.
It's the Time Lords. Ooh.
Ooh.
So what did you guys think about the Mrs. Flood bit though? Because that
Mm.
was what I was all dialed in on. She's like, "Oh, did he use this or did he have this on him?" I forget exactly what she called it.
The
And they're like, "Yeah,
Vindicator.
the Thinkticator."
Yes. Now, this was another comment I made in the ups and downs. I didn't think it was a bad scene. I like that we're kind of getting a bit more from her in terms of she's clearly knows what a vindicator is and all that. What I will say is it does feel a little bit like the whole Mrs. Flood cameos are starting to feel very much just like the Susan Twist cameos in season one at this point. I'm kind of hoping for a bit next week. I feel like we need a bit more than just the brief cameo that's just like, who's she gonna be this week? As opposed to, can we start to learn a bit more about her? Because at this point, it just feels like Susan Twist 2.0. Um,
I think as well, it's like because they said before the series started, she's in every episode. So for me, I have a checklist and it's Tears and
mhm.
Flood.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I will say that because we hadn't seen her in the rest of the episode, as soon as Mo was talking to someone and we hadn't seen Mrs. Flood yet, I knew it was going to be Mrs. Flood, even when she had a different voice. It just it was a bit predictable this week, which is why I'm kind of at the point where I feel like we need a bit more from her now, because otherwise it's just getting a little bit repetitive.
Does it change either of your guys' theories about like her identity or like what she's about or what or her whole role in all of this is?
I don't know. I have my theories. I have my theories about who she is. I think last week's episode maybe put more credence to that theory because of the whole her traveling to a different time, whereas before we'd seen her. And I guess this one does the same because she's in the future this time. So I think that definitely supports some of my theory. But I also do feel like at this point we're still not really getting much information. So this is what I mean by we need a bit more now because we're not being fed enough to really care about who she is at this point. We need more.
I'm curious if she will be, well, I mean, next week's the Ruby Sunday standalone episode, right? So
Hmm.
hopefully the fact that if Mrs. Flood is in every episode, her appearance in that may lend some sort of reveal, since it'll be more Ruby centric than Doctor centric. Maybe that'll tip some clues as to what I don't know, because isn't didn't she say from the very jump that she's like working for someone else? So even beyond Mrs. Flood, there's someone beyond Mrs. Flood that we still know nothing about, right?
Yeah, it's all getting a bit confusing. It's all getting a bit, I don't know. I just feel like if they don't start to elevate it into something more than a brief cameo, it's starting to get a little bit kind of predictable, and therefore no one's really that interested in it anymore. So you want to keep people interested, but in my mind, you need to just change it up a little bit now so that if you get to episode 4 and it's just the same thing again, I don't know. I don't know. Um,
The like cruelest trick would be like she reveals she's like I'm with the BBC and Disney Plus and we've decided to cancel the show. And this is the series finale. It's just her completely breaking character.
so meta.
Yes, the show is over. You
That would
guys
be, I
didn't
mean,
watch.
it would be a hell of a way to do it, though. Oh, actually, Joe, what's funny about it? Sorry, you just mentioned about like because you guys didn't watch. Within seconds of the episode airing, you had all the grifters like, "Oh, it's the lowest views ever. Ah, the show is
Right.
dead." You cannot judge, and I'm not defending it, but you cannot judge the way things are shown today the way they were in 2005.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, you just can't because it's different. You know, it's not all based on the BBC airing at,
hmm
whatever o'clock on a Saturday, because you have half the, well, not half, a portion of the audience are watching it on Disney Plus. A portion of the audience are getting up at stupid o'clock and watching it on iPlayer, and a portion of the audience are watching it there. I feel that the people watching this video are on the same page as us.
hmm
And there are the people that are just like, cool story, bro. Ah, it's dying. No one's watching it. But
hmm
sorry, that was pet
Well, if
peeve.
you want to look at that, if you want to look at that, obviously the BBC viewing figures are wildly different compared to 2005. But this episode, the overnight viewing figures for this episode went up from last week. So I would suggest that people saw last week's and thought, this one's really, really good. And so this week, the viewing figures have gone up, even just on those BBC viewing figures.
As I said,
Because I
everything should be based on the viewing figures, and
like,
when they're up and they're good.
right, the time has come. We have now had 3 episodes, so we can start building our season 2 ranking. So I'll leave mine till last. I'll start with Mick because you've got 3 episodes to rank here.
Mhm.
You've got the Robot Revolution, you've got Lux, and you have The Well. Please, can you give us your ranking of the 3 episodes we have seen so far?
Okay, so I would go controversial, but I'm gonna go The Well as my least favorite so far. I'm gonna go Robot Revolution as my second, and then Lux as my first.
Interesting. Danny was right. This is where it gets spicy. This is where things get juicy. Sean, what about you?
I no Robot still is my number three, um, and I think I enjoyed the well more than looks.
Oof,
I think I did, yeah.
blasphemy.
I am in full agreement. I When I watched Lux last week, I was like, oh, this is great. It's going to take a lot to move this one. After watching The Well, I was like, oh well, The Well is miles up there. It's going to take a lot to move The Well. I think this is the best episode of this era. I think it's the best 15th Doctor episode we've had so far. I really, really enjoyed it. So yeah, I would say The Robot Revolution, Lux, The Well.
I wonder what it
Uh,
says that Ellie, you and I put the episode that was not entirely written by Russell T Davis as number one.
That is actually a very interesting point because I do feel like we should maybe just give a shout out to Sharma Angel Wolfall because I do feel like everyone's taken so much, shining such a light on the whole Midnight Connections, which is obviously where Russell T Davis became involved with this episode. And everyone's been talking about Russell and his involvement and the Midnight elements of the story that we've kind of overlooked the fact that this was an episode not entirely written by Russell T Davis. And I think probably the majority of what makes this a great episode is the story of it as opposed to, obviously we do have that midnight link. So I think we probably should give a little bit of credit and a round of applause to our first non-Russell T Davis solo written episode of the season so far. Based on the next time clips that we've seen for Lucky Day, what are your guys' thoughts about next week's episode, what we're going to see next week?
I think I'm excited to see Ruby Sunday back. I was super bummed when when all the rumors popped up about her leaving. I think her and the Doctor are great. I like how I love Belinda and the Doctor, but I also love Ruby and the Doctor, and I for very different reasons. Ruby and the Doctor were like instant best friends, like had the real stepbrothers vibe. Will Ferrell and oh my gosh, I don't even know why I brought it up because I don't remember the other actor's name. Oh, it's
John
embarrassing.
C. Riley.
Yeah, John C. Riley. There we go. Um, but no, they were just like, did we just become best friends kind of
Yep.
thing? And that was, yeah, that's definitely like their vibe. So seeing Ruby come back, and I talked to Russell T Davies about this episode, and he said that he had hinted to me because as he does, he's like, oh, it's the greatest episode we've ever written. Every episode he's ever written is the greatest. But he said that this is one that will explore something that Doctor Who has never done, which is the aftermath, the immediate aftermath of a companion traveling with the Doctor, the PTSD that comes along with that, trying to put back the pieces of your life together. Ruby went through a massive change in finding her birth mother, which is something near and dear to my heart as a father of an adoptee. That's seeing that storyline continue. And yeah, just dealing with the stress of, I mean, you go from zooming around space and getting shot at all the time, and then all of a sudden you're in a normal life. How can your life ever be normal? After experiencing all that, you're always going to be looking over your shoulder, expecting something crazy to happen. And I'm very excited to see how the episode examines that.
Yeah, I really like Millie Gibson. I'm happy to see her back. Someone shared over the weekend. Um, it was the picture of the three of them standing together. Millie, Shooty, and Varda, and it was just like I'm really looking forward to them to deliver on this bloody picture.
Yeah.
And I am looking forward to seeing her back for sure. And also, there's always a fairly useless boy toy in these situations. I'm looking forward to seeing how useless the boy toy is. Um,
Hey, I'm speaking to that fairly useless boy toy, Jonah Howard King for
well, then
Cinema
you
Blend,
tell him
coming up
from
this
me
week.
that I hope he is the best of the useless boy toys.
He's hey, that's the live action Prince Eric you're talking about there.
Okay.
So before we have a fight over boy toys, um, I would say the thing that I'm most intrigued by, because you've just said obviously, Sean, about delivering on those three characters
Hmm.
being together. Obviously, we still have this big thing about Belinda and the Doctor not being able to reach Earth. So what I'm interested to see is how we can have
Yeah.
all three of these characters in an episode together when you technically can't have them together because Belinda and the Doctor cannot get back to Ruby's time.
Hmm.
So I'm interested to see how we're going to have these two storylines overlap. We've seen in the trailer, in the preview, that we do somehow have the Doctor interacting with Ruby. So I'm interested to figure out how that's possible, how they're going to work around that. Are we having flashbacks? Is she hallucinating? What's going on here? Yeah, that's my biggest intrigue for what we're going to see next week, I think. But until next week, everybody stay safe, look after yourself, and watch all our other content about this episode if you feel like it. And yeah, bye bye.
Bye.